Welcome, everyone. Happy Sunday, June 25th, 2023. Missed the Friday show this week, but we're going to do something a little bit different. I've been playing around, finally got StreamYard up and running. I think my audio is lagging just like a quarter second behind my video, but that'll be fixed for next time. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin. Obviously, there was that great Canadian Bitcoin conference. I'll tell you guys all about that who didn't get to make it. And a bunch of interesting stuff this week regarding a spot Bitcoin ETF filed by no other than the amazing, subtle BlackRock, and what that means for the space and where it could be going. So this week, I've taken it back a little bit. I haven't compiled a whole bunch of different news stories, still kind of catching up from this weekend. This weekend, I was putting up walls. And that always sounds so weird. That sounds like so negative, but literally putting up walls in my cabin on the island. Had a great friend over. Some awesome times on the island. Maybe make a little Bitcoin retreat out there one day. Who knows? But yeah, missed the Friday, but we're gonna be back on track pretty shortly, and trying some new stuff out with this format. Maybe we'll get some more guest speakers on more regularly. I said I wanted to do that in the past, and hopefully we'll do that moving forward. So if you have an opinion about Bitcoin in the future, you don't mind showing your face, or you can come on here and just share your voice. You want to talk about Bitcoin, send me a message on Twitter, and we'll get you in the show. We're gonna do maybe a little roundtable thing where everyone can kind of chime in when I go live on Fridays and share their thoughts on where the space is going. Today basically we're going to talk about this BlackRock ETF. If it really is a big deal for Bitcoin. Obviously, the price of Bitcoin has been doing really well this last week. Maybe in part due to that. And we're going to be talking about some quickie news, things that showed up in the world of finance, more specifically Bitcoin. This is a Bitcoin only show today, pretty much. And then a couple of predictions that I have going forward for the next 365 days. We'll see how many of them come true. If you agree with me, if you don't, chime in on the comments. I'm going to be able to pull comments up on the stream now. So for those who are watching the stream, post going live, you'll be able to see what people in the community set up. And we'll have fun with it, man. Ladies, men, whatever you want to say. All right, first things first. Let's pull up this chart. This is the Bitcoin dominance chart. And so if you know what that is, if you don't know what that is, it is a chart that maps how much of the entire crypto market cap of all cryptocurrencies combined, how much of a share that Bitcoin holds relative to everything else. And so finally, we have broken over the 50% mark, which means that Bitcoin is over 50% of all cryptocurrencies in terms of market share. And this isn't too uncommon, but ever since the ICO boom in 2017, you've seen Ethereum, all these other things a lot of us like to call shitcoin show up on the market. And yet again in 2020, a new wave of NFTs and new coins and whatever, blah, 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 showed up. Lots of Ponzi's went to zero. And finally, Bitcoin's taking the lead again. It's been the best performer this year, I think, of pretty much all the cryptocurrencies. It drawed down the least out of all the cryptocurrencies. And now it's kind of reclaiming its rightful spot at the top. What's interesting to look at when you consider this chart too, and maybe I'll figure out how to do another one, is this also includes the market cap of stable coins. And so some people, when they look at cryptocurrency market cap, it kind of feels a little unfair to include Tether and USDC, because these are not really venture projects. These are just derivatives of the US dollar. And if you take those out of the equation, so you have all the cryptocurrencies minus the stable coins, Bitcoin's dominance is closer to 60%. So looking pretty good. And if you're a chart person, basically we had a straight drop from about 74% dominance to about 38 to 48 for the last 2 years. And now Bitcoin's breaking above that. So the leader, the king, is back in the throne. And it's kind of interesting. In terms of the US dollar price, Bitcoin's doing pretty well too. It looks like we've set a monthly higher low. Always a good sign. Again, we can talk technicals all day, but what was really important back in 2020 was that in order for Bitcoin to break to a new all-time high, we had to consolidate and set this little monthly higher low. So we had to reach a high point, pull back for a month, and then continue upwards. And so looking at this 2020 chart, it looks a little similar to the 2023 chart where, this was August 2020. It kind of peaks out around 1200 or 12,500. That was about when Michael Saylor bought in, chills out for the next September, and then October it resumes upwards. And then by November, we got a new all-time high, or December, we had a new all-time high, and the rest is history. Not going to say the same thing repeats, but definitely from a technical perspective, what you want to see in Bitcoin is it for it to make these higher lows rather than have these like V-shaped bounces back to all-time high. You want to have these levels of support where market players know that someone's going to step in and buy. So yeah, by setting that this month, it's been very impressive. And it looks like Bitcoin could go higher quite a bit into the end of the year. I remain confident that we're not going to hit a new all-time high in 2023, but we all know the game. A year after the halving, it's liftoff time, generally speaking. And so far, if history repeats, and it's looking pretty damn similar to 2019, Bitcoin's in a pretty good position. So risk on is back in Bitcoin, and who knows what new stories are going to come out of it. The big one this week, the thing that everybody is talking about, is this BlackRock ETF. And so ETFs for Bitcoin have existed in this really weird territory for a long time, where countries like Canada and I think in Germany, they have these ETFs. And an ETF, an exchange traded fund, all that is a stock that you can buy that just represents the movement of Bitcoin. So a company will likely either buy Bitcoin or a derivative of Bitcoin like Bitcoin futures, and they will program essentially a trading instrument to trade alongside the net asset value of those things. And market makers will ensure that it relatively stays the same. And the point of all this is essentially, the traditional finance world cannot just go out and go to, Bitcoin Well or ShakePay or Swan or Coinbase and just load up on Bitcoin. Like all these massive pension funds and companies and individuals with fiduciary duties cannot, just market buy on Coinbase and say, this is my allocation. They want to have it in a licensed brokerage account. And there's reasons for that. One of them being tax advantages. If you buy Bitcoin today, and it appreciates a certain amount and you want to sell it, you don't really get preferential tax treatment. But if you had it in something technically like a TFSA, you would. And so there is a demand for these derivatives as long as those laws are in place that kind of protect and shelter those products. The problem is that in America, it's been very hard to get a instrument that kind of covers all your bases. So everyone, since the beginning of time has been talking about these ETFs. I got to have a Bitcoin ETF. And so back in 21, we did officially get one in the United States, the first of its kind, called BITO. But the challenge with BITO is it wasn't based off of a spot Bitcoin price. Bitcoin trades, within 1 or 2% of, whatever 30,439 is as of making this video on a bunch of different exchanges. There's no like one price for Bitcoin, like there is one price for stock or one price usually for oil and other commodities. It's very distributed, and there's kind of a rough consensus of what the price is. And so because of that, organizations like the Securities and Exchange Commission have kind of stonewalled the making of an ETF because they want to make sure that wherever the true data of Bitcoin's price is coming from, they have surveillance agreements so they can see, is someone manipulating the price? Because if you have a whole bunch of Bitcoin, you could go on an exchange and, spoof a bunch of sell orders that aren't really real. And so they want to have surveillance on the biggest exchanges in order to approve a spot Bitcoin ETF. And that's the reason that they haven't done it in the US. A lot of other countries, they don't have those sort of stringent regulations on, what you can and can't have as a Bitcoin ETF. But the SEC does. And, we've been talking on this show, and you've probably followed that, the SEC and the US government have been really clamping hard down on crypto exchanges, even Coinbase in particular, despite the US government actually going and using Coinbase as its de facto place to sell all the Bitcoin that they seize in, illicit transaction cases like maybe Silk Road or some hackers. So despite the SEC going after Coinbase for selling illegal securities and all that, it's a very integral part of how the government actually integrates and uses and offloads and shores up liquidity for Bitcoin. So what makes this really interesting is that BlackRock, as an organization, they don't go around and they don't file ETFs. Well, they do file a lot of ETFs, but they don't do it haphazardly. And so there's a process. When you file an ETF, you have a couple of days and weeks and review periods, essentially, for the SEC to file complaints or approvals as they see necessary. BlackRock has filed about 525 ETFs in total, and only one of them has been rejected. So when they go and they apply for an ETF, they get it. They're the biggest, wealth manager in the world. They want to do an ETF on a certain asset class. It gets done. And so the question is, well, this whole better half of this year, we've been hearing about how the government doesn't like cryptocurrency. The SEC is clamping down on it. We're chasing Bitcoin mining out of states, but the biggest financial institutions in the world are saying, yeah, we're pushing through and we want to get this as a regulated product. So how do you really contest with that? Why is it that the big, private wealth managers want to get into this so badly, but the government is saying, no, we're walking away from it? And I think very soon you're going to see a kind of a spit take from the halls of Congress or the halls of regulators, realizing chasing out all this infrastructure has not really suppressed the usage of Bitcoin, has not really suppressed people wanting to get exposure to the asset class, but it's just moved it offshore. And so you have all these other countries like the UK, Hong Kong, France that are saying, great, the US is giving up their lead. They don't want to be a part of a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency future. We'll take the lead. We'll offer, preferential tax treatment. We'll offer, regulatory clarity. We'll offer everything that the US won't. And the price of Bitcoin just stays steady and it's doing pretty well despite that. And I think, the US government is going to realize very soon that they could have potentially bungled up a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And for them, in one sense or another, that's opportunity, right? If you have regulated products onshore, you can tax the sale of them, right? But if you chase it all offshore, you can't tax it. And so a country like America should never really chase these things. Because in the end, you need all the tax money you can get to pay all that debt that you're still never going to pay off anyways. So yeah, I think you're going to see a bit of a 180 there. But I pulled up a thread here and we can kind of go over some interesting things about this BlackRock ETF filing. So first, for some perspective, it's called the iShares Bitcoin Trust filing. It is the 28th attempt at launching a spot Bitcoin ETF in the US. And BlackRock is the 20th company to file for one of these things. So the SEC, up to this point, they've denied every application for a spot Bitcoin ETF. And so just to clarify, like a spot Bitcoin ETF means that the companies would have to go out and buy real Bitcoin, not derivative future Bitcoin, off of something like Coinbase and store it and show proof of their holdings in some form or another to regulators. So there's no fake or paper Bitcoin involved in this. There's a lot of transparency involved with these spot Bitcoin ETFs. And so next here, consider that Grayscale filed for 3 ETFs on May 9th. BlackRock, one of the largest issuers of ETF through its subsidiary iShares, would take notice of this. Grayscale may believe they can prevail in their suit to convert GBTC into an ETF, and BlackRock may share that view. So lowdown for people who don't know what GBTC is. This is the biggest single fund, the biggest single holder maybe of Bitcoin in the world, second to Satoshi. And so they issued this trust back in 2013. It's a one-way sort of thing. So you put Bitcoin into it, they give you these GBTC shares. Each share represents like a sliver of Bitcoin, but it's not necessarily tied to the price of Bitcoin. Which is a little bit hard to get into, but because it's not a ETF, there's no redemption mechanism. GBTC actually trades about 38% cheaper than the underlying Bitcoin that they actually hold. So it's kind of a mess. So they're looking to also do an ETF as well. So you got similar ETFs, like I said, trading in Canada and Europe. But let's go down to essentially what the issue is here and what makes this ETF a little bit different. So BlackRock's ETF has a unique mechanic. The trust intends to issue shares on a continuous basis. The trust issues and redeems shares only in blocks of 40,000 or integral multiplies thereof. A block of 40,000 shares is called a basket. Each basket is $1 million. Baskets will be offered continuously at the net asset value per share, calculated at 4 p.m. by Coinbase for 40,000 shares on the day that an order to create or redeem a basket is accepted by the trust. So they're creating these baskets of shares that represent their Bitcoin holdings, and that changes dynamically on kind of a day-to-day basis. And they're using Coinbase as essentially their prime market, their brokerage to do this. So this daily model of redemptions will reduce the transaction costs for ETF creation, redemption, and competition assures fair pricing. So this is another issue is right now, Americans, when they want to get exposure to like something similar to a Bitcoin ETF, they're going to be buying GBTC, but GBTC has a management fee of 2% per year, which is pretty crazy. So they're taking 2% of the net asset value of everything that they hold, which right now is 6% of all the Bitcoin in existence. And I think that equates to about $30 billion of Bitcoin. They're getting 2% of that every single year. Doesn't matter what happens to the price of Bitcoin, they're just pulling out their 2% fee. So it's a cash cow for them. So this BlackRock ETF would be a much cheaper thing for investors to kind of own relative to the GBTC fund, which is bleeding perpetually at about 2% a year. So is it enough to get the BlackRock application approved? This guy doesn't think so. The Winklevoss twins have also put in a Bitcoin ETF similar mechanically, and NYDIG as well. And the other issue, like we've talked before, is the shared surveillance agreement by the SEC. So there is no exchange that deals Bitcoin right now that the SEC recognizes as a national security exchange. So you got things like the NASDAQ and the NYC and these things that trade oil. These are all technically under a regulatory framework that allows, SEC and government organizations to monitor every single trade and transaction that goes on. The SEC right now cannot look at all of the trading participants and all the trades and all that and all the surveillance that goes on something like a Coinbase or a Gemini. It's a little bit opaque, and they've said come register with us, but apparently there's no pathway to actually get this done. So right now there is no official cryptocurrency exchange that is registered with the government that the government can kind of see all the data on. Now you might argue that the FBI or the CIA can get the snoop on it, but officially this data is not being shared with a government organization, which every other exchange kind of is at this moment in time. All right, I won't go on too much longer with this, but I think the big thing to kind of take away from all of this is that BlackRock would not be pursuing this if they didn't feel that something materially changed in the way that regulation was going to go around Bitcoin. And one of the biggest developments in the last week or two is that there was this exchange that launched, and you've probably never heard of it, called EDX. And EDX, it's a platform where you can trade Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin, and that's it. So none of the other things, the ones that most people would deem as kind of commodities or non-securities. And so this exchange is backed by Charles Schwab, Fidelity, and Citadel Securities, which are some of the biggest official market makers in the world for U.S. markets. So it's not a exchange started by some Silicon Valley whiz kid or some guy with a fuzzy black afro in the Bahamas that's under arrest. This is started by the biggest players in the financial industry as a crypto exchange. So I think there is some type of link between these. So EDX is going to be, market making and settling prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of these other things. And essentially, ETFs moving forward could look to a exchange like that once it's been around for long enough, once it has enough volume, and say, okay, this could be considered a national security exchange, and you could build an ETF based on the pricing of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever on one of these things. So there's a connection of all these industry players getting into Bitcoin. So every bit of FUD you've seen, Bitcoin can't scale, all these gangsters running away, yield platform collapses. Great, fine and dandy, but while all that stuff was happening, big institutions were still scooping up and loading up on Bitcoin, and it's a matter of time before they're eventually allowed to put out, one of these ETFs. And once an ETF, a proper spot ETF for Bitcoin is out, all it takes at that point is the Bitcoin marketing team, including yours truly, and financial advisors everywhere to say, maybe everyone should have like a 0.5 or a 1% or a 2% allocation of Bitcoin. And then the game really gets going. These things see an intense amount of demand. The structure makes it so that they have to go out and actually buy real Bitcoin. And the problem is that nobody wants to sell their Bitcoin. I'll try and pull up a tweet here from Dylan LeClaire, but there is a great chart here that illustrates how much Bitcoin is actually liquid on the market versus not. And so this little orange Oh, my camera froze. One sec. Sorry, technical things. I don't know why it does that. It gets too hot. Summertime. Boom. I'm back. All right. So the chart here basically shows the price of Bitcoin, which is the black line, and then the orange graph here represents the number of Bitcoin that have not moved at all on the blockchain for over a year. So the number of Bitcoin that have not moved on the blockchain is something like 60%. So 60% of all Bitcoin has not moved wallets in about a year. That is a record high amount. So generally what happens is when the price of Bitcoin goes up dramatically, dormant Bitcoin that's been sitting around in wallets, it starts to move on exchanges and people cash out. I would say my activity regarding Bitcoin represents that a little bit. In bear markets, I'm just adding to wallets, and in bull markets, I'm maybe pulling some off and spending money to make the next video or something like that, right? And so it's the same thing with Bitcoin. You can see this correlation between the amount of dormant Bitcoin kind of dropping as Bitcoin surges to new highs. It's kind of the market motivating people to finally come out and sell. There has to be a price in which people are willing to sell. And when Bitcoin's sideways or bearish, people are accumulating more rather than selling out of profit taking. So yeah. So really interesting chart there. And basically the reason I wanted to bring this up is that as we have gone sideways forever, we have so much dormant Bitcoin on the books that when the big surge of people comes in, my big prediction is that the next bull run that we see, and I adamantly believe Bitcoin will see a new all-time high in the next like 2-3 years. The next bull run we see from trough, the bottom of the bear market, to peak will be a multiple higher of the last. So what I mean by that is that the bottom of the bear market for the last cycle was about $3,000 and Bitcoin went to about $69,000. So mathematically, that works out to about like a 21 or a 22x multiple of the bottom to the top. So Bitcoin did a 22x. If you bought the bottom, you sold the top, you made 2,200% basically. 2,300%. Might be wrong on that, but that's, you see where I'm going with that. I think this time around, let's just say theoretically, the bottom was whatever happened in FTX, 16K. The multiple will be higher than 22x this time around, because I think in the next 2-3 years, a product like this gets launched and a whole new wave of investors that didn't have access in the last bull run because either their fiduciary, their wealth advisors wouldn't give them access, or they just couldn't be bothered to do these Coinbase crypto exchanges or whatever. They're going to have ETFs to buy, and the ETFs will have to go out and buy a lot of Bitcoin on behalf of everyone who wants to get it. It's a lot of hopium, but you got to remember there's 42 million millionaires in the world. And I think that's an old stat. And we're going to be brushing up against only 21 million Bitcoin. I think there's only about, less than a million Bitcoin left to mine. And now we know 60% of Bitcoin is not going to be moving. So let's just say conservatively, there's about 11 million Bitcoin that people are willing to part with anywhere between $0 to $100,000. And there's 42 million millionaires who likely don't have 1% exposure to it. Can only really go one way. So that's my math on it. Samuel Adams says a 10x would put it at 300K. So I would be looking at it from a the bottom perspective. So a 10x from 16K would be 160K. A 22x would put it about 400K. I think the next cycle could possibly be higher. And I think when you get about 500K is when it starts rivaling the market cap of gold, depending on where gold is on a given day. So yeah, big stuff with the ETF. We got Benjamin Dichter here. If you watched my last video, he was the eponymous trucker who showed me the world of trucking. But I wanted to get him on the show today because besides all the ETF stuff, I had a chance to go to the Canadian Bitcoin conference, and that would be maybe about the third Bitcoin conference I've ever gone to. And I think before I started going to conferences, I kind of wondered, like, why do so many Bitcoin conferences exist? Like, it seems like we're a relatively small group of people, that are cultish about, the world's hardest money. And I'm starting to realize more and more why we have them. It's not just to get together and, hear from great speakers or foment about the state of this fiat world, but it brings a sense of community that is really hard to form in online places like Twitter. And it brings all of us together in one room to share experiences outside the Bitcoin world. So going out to dinner, doing events in certain cities all over the world. And what Benjamin was a part of this last week was something called the BTC Mass Freedom Festival. And I think what that represents is essentially where the puck is moving for Bitcoin based events. I think you're not just going to see a whole bunch of people rent out a hotel ballroom and talk macro for like 2 days. You're going to see more inclusive activities that are open to the general public where people can go and mingle, and settings with food trucks and concerts and all sorts of things. So without spoiling it all, let's bring up Benjamin. And yeah, here we go. I think you're on the stream here. Benjamin, how was the fest? Tell us about it.
What's up, dude? It was pretty good. I'm a little tired because I just got home.
How long is the drive?
It's not that long, but after you've been out for a very, very long day, and the night before there was an event that was hosted by Mass Adoption as well. They had their monthly event, and Jason Mayer was there speaking, who wrote the Progressive Case for Bitcoin, and Larry Lepard and Anders was there, as well as Greg Foss. So that was the night before. Oh, wow. And then go home, go to sleep for as much time as possible, and then the next morning early, starting with the festival, getting down there. And it was just a very long day, so I finally got into my truck at 9 o'clock to leave Boston for Toronto.
Oh, so you brought your rig down there, hey?
Yeah, our trucks were there. I brought myself and Bridget and Chaba. Chaba, you would have seen all over Fox News as the Ontario Gestapo, the Ottawa Gestapo police were kneeing him in the chest and kicking him in the head when they were arresting him in Ottawa at the end of the protest. And then they charged him. Beating the crap out of him wasn't enough. Then they had to give him trumped up charges, right? So he came down as well as Bridget. With the three of us, brought our trucks down there, and it was amazing. It was really nice. I've gotten to know those guys now for over a year that we gotten to know each other, and they're really passionate about Bitcoin. They're really passionate about the education aspect and onboarding people and making them feel comfortable, understanding what it is. And it's people from all sorts of backgrounds, right? It's people that from the finance industry and people from education and all walks of life come together. Mm-hmm. And this was the first, really, usually like all these Bitcoin meetups, you get together, you go to a pub, you have dinner, that sort of stuff. This was just like all parties and people, acting as vendors. Foss was in the dunk tank.
Oh, really? Oh, great. Yeah, do you have footage of that? I got to see
it's online, actually. I think Foss put it up there. It's hysterical.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, man. And that was it. So I started driving back, but, it's a 9-hour drive in a truck. Mm-hmm. And after the first 4 hours, you're looking at the clock and you're like, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe I should sleep for a little bit. And so you decide, okay, I'm going to go to sleep for 2 hours or 6, and then you end up coming back in the middle of the afternoon. But it was worth it. It was a lot of fun. It was great.
That's awesome. Yeah,
lots of ideas. Hola, ¿cómo estás? We had a lot of people from Latin America there as well. It was really great.
That's killer. So, what was overall turnout like?
It was a small. They rented a part of the Reggie Jackson, I don't know, I guess it's part of one of the university campuses, the athletic center. So they rented one of their parking lots that's covered by solar panels. And, there's only so much that so many people you could fit in that little area. So I think the idea was to keep it, relatively reasonable anyways for the first one. There was, a couple hundred people, but it was great. It was a little bit smaller than Toronto was, but Toronto was that was the first Canadian headline Bitcoin conference, so a little bit of a different feel. And this is the first thing that was more about the entertainment value and kind of taking those two disciplines of entertainment and Bitcoin and putting them together. A lot of fun, music, bands, all that sort of stuff, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, it's interesting to kind of take like a 100-foot perspective and see the evolution of Bitcoin events, because I think it was 2022 was the first year that Bitcoin Magazine they decided we're gonna incorporate a music festival into this.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, actually, for them, what I heard was that that basically ended up costing them any profit they had on the event, just getting the
Oh, yeah.
headliners. They had like Logic and a bunch of great musicians there. But
Yeah.
I think it kind of sparked something. I don't know if it's that event in particular, but I think it's sort of a sign of where some of these Bitcoin events are going in the future, where they're going to be less about getting a whole bunch of people in a dark room talking about macro, and more, a lot more inclusive, you know, getting artists, getting food trucks and things like that. Where do you like, what are maybe some ideas you have of places where these could get, you know, even more inclusive and bring more people in under the tent?
Well, I think this is just kind of the natural progression. First, you start with kind of the base layer of information and what is Bitcoin. Bitcoin deals with our fiat banking system,
Hmm.
and there's that whole outreach of education, which we've been doing for years, right? The next step is we got to make it fun. Now we got to bring in people that really don't care so much about the fiat system. They don't understand the banking system, even they don't understand the current one.
Hmm.
But to show them, hey, there's this alternative. This is how it works, and bring Bitcoin into their lives versus bringing people into Bitcoin. Right? I think that's going to be the shift over the next few years, and that's where the utility is. The utility is not in bringing people to a Bitcoin conference and teaching them about finance, which they know nothing about. It's going to the Honda Tuner Club and saying, hey, you know what? You can buy parts online from this distributor utilizing Bitcoin if you want. And that's going to make things a lot easier to transact for you because that supplier is in Japan. So we're going to just break through this converting from US dollars to Japanese yen. And they'll transact with you in Bitcoin sort of thing. So I think that's going to be the next phase. And that's going to take several years. And it's going to be a kind of generational shift. But you can already see the signs of that happening right now.
Hmm. I think it's a little bit tough to sell people on the utility of Bitcoin without them fully being into like the cultural aspect of Bitcoin in some ways. Like if I'm a passive investor in Bitcoin and I'm like loading it in my cold wallet and all that stuff, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to have a Lightning wallet. Like I think the people who go out and they get Lightning wallets and they start experimenting with paying for things in Bitcoin, they're kind of the happy warriors of our group and they want to see it expand. Like I made a little Twitter thread the other week, which was
Mm-hmm.
I just started asking like every single person I bought something with, do you accept Bitcoin here? And I'm trying to like normalize it in my vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting to see how people react to it. And
And
it
how do
went
they
from
react?
everyone used to just be like, no, like what are you talking about,
Yeah,
to I'm getting people now saying not yet and then smiling, and I'm curious,
that's
like
right.
how does that, what was the turning point? Maybe I just have a small sample size, maybe it's just me coming up with this, but I used to never hear this not yet thing about accepting Bitcoin, and now I hear it all the time when I ask that question. And it's sort of like, what was the shift in people's mindset to maybe just look at it a little bit more positively despite all the crap that Bitcoin's dealt with in the headlines for the last like 2 years?
I think you're seeing a number of things intersect that are going to make it cool. So, for example, you have people like Jack Mallers, young
Hmm.
entrepreneur, right? He kind of exudes coolness, right? Jack Dorsey, to a certain crowd as well, has that same sort of, the guy who created Twitter is into Bitcoin. Oh, okay, must be cool. And
Hmm.
then for like, the boomer investors, people like Larry and Greg Foss, they see the institutions like BlackRock, whether you like them or not, and Fidelity getting involved. It's making Bitcoin cool in that sphere. And I think that our protest in Canada, it's funny, you see people both on the left and the right who are anti the establishment, the military industrial complex I hear all the time, depending where they are on the political spectrum, but anti whoever the man is, that they
Hmm.
saw Bitcoin was the thing that subverted it. It's very interesting. Many years ago, I used to. This is what we had talked about, making Bitcoin sexy at some point. I used to work for Harley Davidson, and the thing that was amazing is during that time, that was right when Harley Davidson was maximum cool. And I mentioned I worked for Harley Davidson. Everyone was like, "Oh wow, that's so cool." They wouldn't know why. They would just know the brand Harley Davidson is cool. And I think we're starting to get to that point where you're going to see that start to happen with Bitcoin, especially with all this SEC nonsense around crypto and the fact that Bitcoin has remained solid and stable despite the claims of somebody who suggested they broke Bitcoin. I don't know what ever happened to that guy, but Bitcoin is still there. And now I think the cool factor, which really has been reserved for the crypto space, is going to start to spill over a little bit into Bitcoin. Not entirely, but you're going to see that happen. And it's going to become a brand. But the best thing is it's a brand that no one manages.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point. And I think because you're bringing up like Udi, he was saying, we broke Bitcoin and whatnot. I get shit from this from the maximalist, but he has a really good point in that I think Bitcoin's brand image has suffered a little bit under the rise of all of these like altcoins and shit coins. Like in the mainstream lens, the people who are not attached to the crypto space, when they see, Paris Hilton flex a Bored Ape NFT, they just think it's part of Bitcoin and it's lumped in. And I think this cycle, like we had the maximalists really pushing the Bitcoin, not crypto thing last cycle. But I think finally, this upcoming cycle will be the time where distinctly Bitcoin will be a separate entity from the rest of the crypto space. And we're going to see people appreciate it in that light a lot more from within the cryptocurrency industry, like all the NFT bros or whatever, but also from outside of it. It won't just get lumped in. You still see it, like Bill Maher, says, "Oh, look at cryptocurrency wasting all this energy," but it's never about just Bitcoin. And then you got like Bitcoin Magazine. They take a headline, somebody will say something about crypto, and then they'll like switch the word to Bitcoin. I had like what was it here? One of the big endorsements I think we can laud is that Jerome Powell said crypto appears to have staying power as an asset class. 2 years from now, he'll just be saying Bitcoin has staying power, is what I think.
I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
And I also, what's very interesting, I'll tell you, I've had some crypto people reach out to me about Bitcoin because of the protests, and they seen my book or have talked to other people and whatever. And they also know that I'm not into altcoins. That's just not my thing. But I'm not hostile towards people. If you want to spend your money, you want to speculate your money in any way, just be honest with people. That's all I ask. But you do with your money what you please. So I'm not hostile towards them. And I think that's that's actually helping to open up the doors and allow us to talk to one another. And it's allowing me to say, listen, you're having two different conversations. Your crypto guys are chasing, you're trading, you're trying to make profits or do projects or whatever. And Bitcoin's something completely different. Bitcoin is a long-term asset play for all of us. And I'm not getting pushback like I had gotten previously. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, and I think even the crypto space, they're embracing some of the terms which maybe rightfully they should embrace, like calling them degenerates, and they've owned shitcoin, and like I'm actually okay with that. Like call it out for what it is. We don't know the potential of this technology. They can hype it up all they want, but it's important to realize that Bitcoin's pretty solid in its identity and its use case. Like it will only expand, but like it knows what it is today. We don't have to think about the potential of what it could be used for in the future as much. Where else all these other things, it's gambling, and you'll have some of these guys poke around at it, but it's really, unfortunately, sometimes the entities like Coinbase, which say, oh, Web3 innovation, it's going to change the way we like exchange value, when they damn well know there's no way like 300 different layer ones are all going to be used in unison by all of us moving forward. And I think they need to be way more upfront, I guess, in their marketing, explaining that to people that, these are super speculative. Some of them are going to go nowhere. Do your own research instead of just blindly endorsing everyone like it's a legitimate project that everyone's going to use in Web3. So
it's almost like they need a rating system.
They do.
They need a third party that's going to look at all these projects for the people who are into that and say, okay, well, this is AAA, this is AA, this is subprime junk.
Hmm.
And so people at least can have a frame. And listen, people will still buy the junk. There are people who are going to go for the high flyers. Okay, fine. Again, that's not me.
Hmm.
And that's really not the nature of most people who are into Bitcoin, especially for the long term, the educators. But whatever, people are going to buy crap. That's just the way it is. And but there's other people who want to speculate, but they want to do it fairly, and maybe they believe in some of the people have some good intentions. And you know what? Like I find we do a lot of impugning motives on people, and always towards the negative.
Hmm.
And sometimes people are just techno geeks and they think they discovered something new and they want to play with it. They want to fund it so they can figure out, is this something worthwhile or not? Okay, fine. That's kind of the process of discovery. But as long as we distinguish between that and what Bitcoin is, as you know, companies like BlackRock and Fidelity are getting into it, they're just two different worlds. And I think we can all learn to get along with one another. That's what I'm going to, try to do over the long term.
Yeah, I think I think we're getting a little bit better with the communication stuff. It's hard. Like Bitcoiners are, and libertarians are by nature, I would say, higher on the disagreeability factor than most people in society.
Oh, I'm in the 95th percentile. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
100%. But the other thing is, remember, they've also been kind of scarred from the block wars.
yeah,
And that, I think that
yeah. They
really,
were vindicated by all their pushback there, right?
that's right. But having gone through that, and like, I really didn't participate in it. I just bought a little bit. I bought Bitcoin Cash because I didn't know what the hell to buy. I didn't know which one was which, right? Because I was right at the time where I was starting to really get into it.
Hmm.
And so I think there's a certain level of PTSD from Bitcoin developers and people who are really invested in the space, as they should. They put their lives into this, and they felt as though people were just coming along and taking advantage of that and trying to wreck the house. And on the other side, I don't know that those people that's what they were actually intending to do. But people start having completely different conversations and talking past one another. And what happens? Things just escalate and they get to the level that they were. But I think we're enough years beyond that,
Hmm.
that it's a different world now, that Bitcoin is solidified in our culture. And I think that's why we see the type of confidence that we see right now.
So let me ask you something. I had a really interesting weekend. You were out and you had the Freedom Fest and you were with a lot of people. And then last week we were both at the Bitcoin
Yeah.
conference in Canada or Toronto. Um, this weekend I was out. I was putting walls up in my cabin.
I saw your
Just trying to
post.
make it look half
Very
decent.
good, sir. You want to build me a house? You can
Yeah,
do that anytime
it's
you
my
like.
proof. That's my fallback career now. Is I
Yeah.
can be a okay carpenter. Um, But one of the cool things was I met someone at the local Vancouver Bitcoin meetup, and
Okay.
he had worked for a few Bitcoin companies in the past, had a similar story to me where did really well in like the bull run, and now is trying to kind of figure out like what do I do next? Like what do I do as my contribution? And it was really nice because I'm still one of those types of people that kind of just enjoy spending one-on-one time with people versus like being in a big crowd. I just find I'm introverted. It's kind of overwhelming, but if I'm just with like one person, I can talk all day with them for like 18 hours and not get drained.
I
Versus if I'm in a
noticed.
crowd of people, I tap out in about like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Um, but he brought up a really interesting point, which was that I love Bitcoin and I want to give back, and I don't really know how. And I'm trying to figure out like I worked in compliance at one company, and I'm trying to figure out like how can I give to this movement. And it made me think that I was in a similar boat where I was making videos as like a corporate video production office or whatever for all
Mhm.
these different things, chasing trends. And then I just got sucked down this Bitcoin black hole where I didn't know how I was going to make money or survive making stuff about Bitcoin, but I can't escape it. And now it's like I will take out credit card debt before I stop making videos about Bitcoin. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop
Yeah.
wanting to contribute to the space. I don't know if it's motivated by, me wanting to get famous or me just wanting to get more Bitcoin into people's hands so that I can pump my own bags. I don't know what it is, but it's like a disease that's got a hold of me. And when I think about you, I think of someone who's been a renaissance man. Like you've done everything, working at Harley
Mhm.
Davidson, you ran your own business, you ran for office, you've started these organizations, you were part of like the biggest protest in Canadian history, pretty much. and you do a bunch of things right now. Like you have your book, you do some editing for other podcasts. Do you feel like that Bitcoin black hole is sucking you in as well, where you just want to like focus on that and figure out how can I dedicate all my time to it? Or are you not feeling that quite yet?
It's funny you mentioned that. I think there's going to be a number of things that are coming down the pipeline in the near future. Things related to Bitcoin. Like, we talked about this. I always have multiple projects that I work on, and it's my many different Trello boards. And I'm looking to tie up a couple of projects I've been working on for some time, and kind of defer it with some of the people I've been working them on, and handing off a large part of the stuff that I did, so I could shift over to focus on a couple of Bitcoin initiatives that have come onto my radar with some people. So I don't know if I would be like, you're a very much attention to detail guy. You are really hyper focused on attention to detail. I'm a broad scope ideas guy, which it's a curse for many, many reasons. So I like to have a little bit in 20 different things at once. I'll never be exclusively in Bitcoin, but I will definitely have a bias towards it and going to incorporate a couple more Bitcoin projects into my life. So I think it just boils down to your nature, and all of our natures. And because, like, when you were helping fix my miner, I had no idea what the hell you're doing, right? Like trying to.
I had no idea what the hell. I've never fixed a miner before. I was just copying what someone showed me once.
I know, but you get in the zone really easily. I notice on very specific and small focused tasks, you will go down the rabbit hole until you understand it all in its fullest essence as quickly as possible. And the rest of the world can blow up around you. You're going to still focus on understanding that thing to its fullest. And I think that's why you're so attracted to Bitcoin. Firstly, it's new. It's in the process of changing the world. And there is so much to explore within it, right? There are so many different avenues and paths that are just being built right now. So this is a good time for somebody like you to focus on Bitcoin, because you're going to have so many different options. And I think that's what's in your subconscious. You're aware that this is a market that hasn't even, or technology that's not even gotten close to mature. So you can understand it on its most basic level and build things around it. I think that's just like you're trying to build your house on your property. It's this interesting metaphor of your journey in Bitcoin, because I notice when I'm watching your posts, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly his Bitcoin journey, but in real time, based on what you described to me.
That's very observant of you. Yeah, I do definitely like fixate on specific things, even if they're not. But the downfall of that sometimes is that you can fixate on things that are not a great productive use of your time and the value of your time. So it's always, I need a little bit of your quality of being able to like zoom out and see the bigger picture and figure out like, where can I allocate myself, right? Like, the long time preference version of it is like, well, why am I putting up my own walls when if I just focus on building a big Bitcoin brand, I can just pay with someone to do it, right? But back of my head, I've always thought it's good to just be good at physical labor, because soon enough, no one will be.
I think we're already there, aren't we?
It's pretty brutal, man. So my girlfriend and a couple people I know, shout out in the stream, they're moving from job to job, and they're looking to get these online jobs again, like hybrid kind of work from home stuff. And what happens is like a job posting will go up on LinkedIn, and within 3 hours it'll have like 300 applicants. And I try to figure out like, how do they figure out who to even interview at that point? And the dirty reality of it is basically like whoever is first to send in their application. So you got to be hitting like F5 to get those jobs. And then on the flip side of this, I was talking to a friend on the island who's an architect and a person in construction, and they cannot find bodies for that work. They're looking everywhere. People have to have these qualifications to do those jobs. There's a lot of immigrants coming in that would do that physical labor, but they can't get the qualifications at the speed that these companies need the bodies for.
That's right.
And so there's this huge division between the jobs that people want and the jobs that are open. And I think that's why we always have this sort of like discontentment when we see 3% unemployment rate. Oh, my camera froze up again. But I'm curious what you think of that, because it's hard to imagine it getting worse than what it is right now, where everybody is just scrambling out the wazoo to get these online jobs, and they just cannot find bodies for these physical ones. You're in the trucking industry where it's kind of flipped a little bit, where they now have, it seems like they have an excess of truckers. Am I right on that?
No, there's
No?
still a massive shortage.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
I was reading something from Freight Waves, and they were saying that I forget what it was. It was like failures to deliver or something were really high. Something is a little bearish in the trucking industry, no?
Yeah, there's a shortage of drivers. That's when you get the failure to deliver,
Oh, okay.
because they just can't fill. They don't have enough trucks that are operational. There are just too many orders that are coming through, because at least in the commodities sector of trucking, I talked about this in a few radio interviews. It was quite slow year to year, but it does seem to be recovering now.
Okay.
Last several weeks have been exceedingly busy. I was on my way back from Boston, and they're like, "Can you take another load tomorrow?" I'm like, "No, I can't." Right? Um, and that happens whenever it ebbs and flows in the trucking industry. Always, usually this time of year is quite quiet, and it
Mhm.
looks like we might even be busier than we were last year.
Really? And
Yeah,
then it seems obviously it's like craziest near Christmas.
leading up to Christmas, right?
Yeah,
So the fall after Labor Day it gets quite busy, but also depends on what types of products are being shipped and whatever, right?
that's true.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and the other thing is, in terms of uh, whatever numbers you're gonna the jobless numbers and whatever. Am I just wrong to say I just don't trust any government statistics anymore? Like, really, I think they're being used at this point. They seem to be used in the same way that soft polls are used to persuade people. And I
Mhm.
think the idea is they don't want to, which is I'm not entirely against. And hear me out. I know it's crazy for some people, but the market responds to positivity, right? And if the economy is just a good reflection on people's mood, and if people's mood is positive, they're going to spend money, and that's going to help the economy thrive. And I
Mhm.
think that's the motive behind trying to artificially inflate the numbers. I don't know that it comes out of, we're talking about um, impugning motives of people that's always negative. I think they just want to do their best to get people out and get the economy turning, and I think that's why you see manipulated numbers.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of working. And to be entirely honest, I think all of this, the economy's recovering, the economy's recovering. Everybody's like, "What are you talking about?" And then all of a sudden, oh yeah, you know what? We're starting to get more loads. We're starting to get this, and people start to get over the hurdles that only Bitcoiners and finance people who would look at the letter of every number on the balance sheet and say, no, this is wrong. Most people don't do that. Most people,
Mhm.
it's just, how do things feel? Things feel pretty good. All right, you know what? I'm a little bit more comfortable putting a little bit more effort and looking long term for my business, sort of thing, my small business sort of thing. So I think that's what's going on. But I just don't believe any of the numbers anymore. They're so jerry rigged to the point that I just don't trust them.
Well, they have like differentials, but I guess like the headlining numbers, like unemployment rate, like that's why everyone says like look at workplace participation as like a better metric of where things are going.
Yeah, it's like, okay, then why do we have an unemployment rate?
Yeah.
Or CPI, the CPI basket. That's the part
Yeah.
that makes me
CBS.
crazy. You're like, so it's kind
And
of
then all the armchair economists like Paul
yeah,
Krugman are like, look at CPI X shelter, X food, X energy. It's just like what?
yeah, because everybody wants to be the smartest guy in the room, and at the end
Yeah.
of the day, it's just kind of, what, just tell me what's going on, and that's it.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Last bit. One of the things I noticed, I haven't walked into a dollar store in ever. I just
Okay.
stopped eating like ton of cheap food, and I feel like Amazon sort of killed the dollar store for me. Like I just get my cheap crap on Amazon. Probably pay more than what I should, but I just end up doing that. But
Okay.
anyway, so I go into a Dollarama this week. There's like a mob in there, like 150 people. I couldn't get through the aisles. Every aisle was like back to back to back with people, and then the waiting line was like 10 minutes. And then you go through the checkout, and I guess I don't know. I just haven't been to a dollar store forever. There's one person operating a till there, and then everything else is self checkout. And
Hmm.
I thought, wow, like this is indicative a little bit of the times. Number one, like the physical jobs are getting dwindled a little bit in retail, but I don't remember ever seeing that many people in a dollar store ever. And it's all in the backdrop of like, inflation, recession, no recession. I mean, that to me is a recession indicator. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a mobbed dollar store, is that after a pandemic, is that sign of economic collapse or economic recovery? I mean, I could look at it two ways, that people just weren't shopping at all, because the dollar store is not just, you mentioned food. I don't know who buys food at the dollar store, but okay, whatever, right? That's why you buy utensils for your kitchen, or
Mm-hmm.
you candles, or kind of like decorative stuff for your apartment or your house. And well, are those the types of goods that they're buying? Because if they're buying mainly those types of goods, that might be a sign of economic recovery. People are going from having no money to having a little bit of money, that they can start to, doll up their house a little bit. Maybe they're thinking to sell it, move somewhere else, and whatever. So I don't know. I think it can work both ways.
Hmm.
And I'm sure half of the people on the financial media, fake news media circuit will tell me I'm completely wrong and I have no clue what the hell I'm talking about. And then the other half would say, oh, yeah, that's exactly it. And at the end of the day, no one knows. No one knows. They all pretend to know.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, well, there is kind of this like common stat that basically like the stocks to buy in a recession are Dollar General and Dollar Tree. It was like 2008 Dollar
Well, it used to be
General.
Procter and Gamble and
Yeah,
what's and what's the other one? Whatever their competitor. It's skipping my mind right now, but you know what I'm talking
yeah,
about.
Dollar Tree I think is the only one where everything is a dollar 50 or less, and then Dollarama it's like anywhere between 1 to 4.50, and then half those things you realize like should not be nearly that price.
We should open a SAT store.
A SAT store. Well,
Buy
nobody
everything
wanted
for
to
100
take me up
sats.
on it because it would probably be a loser for the first little bit, but I
Yeah.
think a Bitcoin vending machine, only Bitcoin, it's one of those bull market things. There will be a point. I think I'll make a promise that like when Bitcoin goes back to, I'll say 50K, I'll pull out 5K, I'll buy a vending machine, we'll rig it up, we'll put it somewhere, and then we
Japan.
can do that.
All vending machines begin their lives of miracles in Japan.
Yeah.
Right?
We need to get a Bitcoin Plinko machine at that rate too.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
All
I'm
right,
just gonna
brother.
wrap up the show here, and
Okay, cool.
yeah, we'll try and do more formats like this. Usually, not. I don't know. What's good time for you? I'm always trying to figure out when people like watching live streams.
If I'm not in the truck on Sunday, which I'm going to be doing less and less because I have so much other work
Mhm.
that's starting to mount up, Sundays are good for me. But by the way, it was really good to spend some time with you last week at
Yeah.
the conference and everybody else. I hope Luke's interviews and his movie, his documentary go well. But did you have a good time? I didn't talk to you at the
Oh, it
end.
was fantastic. It's
Yeah.
it's it's almost frustrating sometimes because you don't get to talk to everyone, and there were some people there like I really wanted to talk to and just didn't
Hmm.
have a chance because everyone was talking. But I made some really great connections. I got the next video in the works already. It's going
Cool.
to be uh, proving that 5-year-olds can learn Bitcoin and they're going to know it better than you in
No,
the
that's
next
awesome.
year.
It's a good idea.
We got to kick the adults' butts into action about this whole. Just reminds me of all those clips in like 2000 where people were like, "What is email? What is the internet?" It's just like we don't have time for like what is Bitcoin in 2023. Like you
Yeah.
needed to get on that train a little while ago, and now it's time to like playfully shame the adults by showing that the kids are ahead of the game on it.
There's some adults who get it. Listen, Lepard and Foss both brought me up on stage, and I don't know if you saw what they did. They put me in their presentation. And they're like, yeah, they described me as Canada's William Wallace, and I'm like, dude, let's not give the government
Yeah.
any ideas. You remember how it ended for him? He got his head cut off. I don't want to do that. But
Wow.
the all the copies of Honking for Freedom I brought, they told me to bring a box. I brought 2 boxes just in case, and the first box sold out in like 45 minutes, and the second box sold out shortly after, within like an hour or two. I don't know, it was just signing books like mad.
We
So
gotta
it was
we gotta
amazing.
get you in Vancouver for the Van Bitcoiners meetup. I'm gonna talk to the guy who hosts that, Fussler. It'd be
Okay,
awesome to
sure.
have you out here. You can crash on my couch.
I have so many people in Vancouver that
You
I've
got to
been
do it.
wanted to get together with and wanted me to come out there as well. So yeah, that might work.
Yeah, we're doing like a little block party similar to the Freedom Fest thing in September, but I think July,
Okay.
August we have like our monthly thing. So I'll get Fussler to reach out and see if anything kind of links up there.
All right,
Yeah,
cool. Let me know, man.
cool.
All right, brother.
All right. Take care.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Peace. Bridget was saying, I was in a grocery store today and they had a robot for security. Freaked me right out, and I stopped and watched it while it watched me. How big was the robot? Was it like a little thing with like a webcam head, or was it like an android like the Tesla bots? Have you guys seen the Tesla bots? They're pretty interesting. Everyone judges them on first watch that, oh, they're too fast. Let's see, Tesla Android. They're called Optimus. Check this out. They're a little slow, but I think what's interesting, I'm trying to see. I think they're running on battery packs, which is kind of a first, because if you look at a lot of the Boston Dynamics ones, I don't think that they're running on battery. And so, yeah, they're running on AI too. That's another thing, is the Boston Dynamics bots, they are all pre-programmed to do specific actions. They're not really responding in real time with AI. But yeah, look at the fingers on that. That is so cool. I don't know, Bridget, was your robot like this, or was it a little bit more primitive? um, and Musk likes to overpromise sometimes, but he thinks that he can get these down to $35,000. So I would ask, at what features would it have to have for you to buy that for your house for $35,000? I think the main thing for me is I'd want it to be able to cook and clean pretty safely. Like, it's pretty easy to load stuff in a dishwasher, but actually be able to say, look in my fridge, make me something gourmet with those ingredients. You're allowed to call, Flash Food or something for like one extra ingredient, but make something fantastic for me. And just have it like whip up something. I'd love that, to have that in the kitchen. And then take out garbage and all that. But I would pay, I don't think it'd need to be that complex for me to pay $35,000 for that. I'm one of these people who's optimistic on tech. I know that there's a lot of stuff with surveillance that is kind of about these things. So, yeah, I still would get one regardless. I just think that they're so cool to have something like that around. I feel like those would be killer for walking dogs, but at the same time, they'd really need to be strong in order for like the dogs not to like just pull it and like tear it across the ground. But also, it's just good to go out and walk your dog. If you're gonna buy a pet, why are you gonna buy a robot to take care of it? That's kind of silly. Okay, lastly, before we go, I wanted to share some Bitcoin predictions just so that I have them on the record for you guys, so you know that I won't just say told you so a year from now, and maybe I'm completely wrong on this. But number one, I don't think in 2023 Bitcoin goes above 35 to 40K. I think that's the top. I'm happy to be wrong because I hold Bitcoin, but I think that's like technically pretty much going to hold it in place. Back in 2022, the previous top, there was like a little bounce. The previous top was about 48K. So maybe it could go up to 48K. I just don't see it really getting into that range. There's just resistance in that area, kind of around here. Mikiko says it would have to be my physical maid, groceries, pet caregiver, personal driver, etc. Yeah, I guess you could put a personal driver in the car. That would be really interesting, actually, is getting androids to go into non-self-driving cars and start the self-driving process with kind of legacy cars. I wonder if that will become a thing, or if they need to have more sensors. I mean, technically, if you are sitting in the driver's seat, you have like a full perspective, you should be as competent as a normal driver. But the cars that have all these sensors, it enhances technically their reaction speed to things because they have full 360 mapping around them. So Natasha says 35K is cheaper than an employee. Agree. And it's a one-time purchase. Now, probably there would be like a subscription model. So you buy for 35K to maintain the AI, whatever. You're probably paying like a couple $100 a month. Bridget says the robot was a stick with a camera. Okay, so not as cool. and probably very creepy. All right. So yeah, first guess is or first prediction, I think, is that Bitcoin will not be going above 35, 40K this year. Love to be wrong, but that's just the way that I see it in the charts. Does that mean sell it all at that point? No, but I also think you will be able to stack for cheaper than that price. So maybe now's a good time to buy, but I also just don't think 40K is great. I think we're going to chill out a little bit before we start ripping upwards. Who knows? Maybe just buy Bitcoin every day. Second prediction is there are companies, specifically in Vancouver, one called CoinOS. And this is kind of like a point of service thing so that you can accept Bitcoin at your business. They are on a roll lately. And you wouldn't know this, but if you're in Vancouver right now, you can go get your haircut at 1, 2, one more downtown, 3 places you can get your haircut in Vancouver and styled, beard shave, whatever. Pay it with Bitcoin. There are something like 14 restaurants in Vancouver. You can pay your bill in Bitcoin using the Lightning Network. You can get a coffee. There was one recently added. It was a little convenience store that you can go to now and get your snacks. There is a jeweler that you can go to, pay with Bitcoin. Donair Place, pizza place in North Vancouver. These are popping up everywhere. And so CoinOS is just one company, but they're going out and they're integrating their POS software and they're managing to convince people you can take Bitcoin. Now, their system is not like Strike where you can pay with Bitcoin and then the merchant can actually just have it automatically swap in US dollars or Canadian dollars and just receive it. They're holding the Bitcoin, but because not everyone's paying with Bitcoin, you just take a little bit of risk of custody and volatility. And if you want to cash out, you can use, Shake Pay, Bitcoin, well, whatever. But all being said, this is one company doing this in Vancouver. They're going out, they're doing this in other communities. You have companies like Byte Federal, Ibex Mercado, Strike, all sorts of little like merchant POS system companies out there that are saying, well, we have the tech now. We just need people to use it. And so they're paying money and expenses to go and get people to travel around and to get more Bitcoin adoption in everyday places outside just kind of the circular economy thing. So my prediction is that this is going to expand like crazy this year, and you're going to see Bitcoin taken everywhere. There was mumblings 2 years ago. Some company was going to make Bitcoin cashback rewards and enable Starbucks to accept Bitcoin. All that fell apart. But this year is the year in the next 365 days where if you're in a big city, Bitcoin is coming to you. And if you want to figure out where you can spend your Bitcoin, it's btcmap.org. They are the most up-to-date map on where you can spend Bitcoin. Look at this. We got Victoria Kayak Tours and Rentals. We got 2 doctors here in the U.S. on Ana Cortez Island. Bellingham even has 12 places these days. A law firm that takes it. An auto clinic that takes it. I don't know about this. IMAX in Bellingham that takes it. But go look around. Put in your address in btcmap.org, and you might be surprised at who's accepting Bitcoin near you. Edge of Thought Ideas asks, have I been to any of these? Yes, in Vancouver, Cafe Artigiano on East Hastings is taking it. And they're a pretty big chain around Vancouver. And I think they've said that if the experiment goes well, they're going to open it up to every location. So if you like $5 coffees, $6 coffees that are now 8,000, 9,000 sats, you can go spend them. And it's lightning and it works so easy. It's effortless. They even have machines that print out receipts for you so you can see and keep all your accounting in one place as well. So yeah, this is going to take over the world in the next year. It's really accelerating, and more the price goes up, more number goes up, the more that these businesses will tell their friends in business to accept Bitcoin as well. Another thing I think is that a lot of provinces, a lot of states, it's worse in America. They've tried to put these like bans on Bitcoin mining setups and all that, and that's great. But it's going to hurt when you see your neighbor have Bitcoin mining, generating tax revenue, improving the community, being a load-bearing electrical service for when you have excess solar and wind. In order for renewables to work, someone has to be taking some of that peak demand. And there's really only one thing that can just turn on and off whenever and absorb peak demand for electricity usage or peak supply for electricity usage, and that's Bitcoin. So remember, when you're building solar, whether it's for your cabin on an off-grid island or your town in Alberta or whatever, You have to put as many solar panels in a field that could power the city on the darkest day with the shortest amount of sunlight in the entire year. Anything short of that, you're not going to be able to power your city, or you're going to have to rely on another electricity source. So when people build out their renewable energy plants, they have way too much electricity generation in the summers because they're optimized for the winters. And this specifically pertains to North America and places kind of away from the equator. But they're going to realize very quickly that Bitcoin is an ideal option. And you have a lot of old ASICs that are coming onto the market, and excess electricity is dirt cheap. So essentially, you just need to get these containers involved, put them on site, absorb that extra electricity, mine a bit of Bitcoin, peak hours on a summer day, and you can pay for certain electrical setups that way, and just monetize every little bit of excess electricity that these solar plants or wind plants are generating. So I haven't said that too eloquently, but I think the point is that all of these different places doing crypto mining bans, they're going to realize very soon that bad decision for the power companies in the region. And it will be very easy to reverse and start inviting these people back in to make money, even with the halvings, even with all this stuff. When your electricity is extra generated and there's no cost involved to just absorbing that, Bitcoin miners of any ilk can find a reason to profit. The only cost at that point is just transporting them on a location and getting a technician to boot them up. But you can use S9s, S19s, whatever, and they'll be able to monetize it. So yeah, undo the bans. What was my next prediction? It wasn't a big one, but I think last year or 2 years ago, you saw a lot of sovereign wealth funds get involved in the crypto space, not the Bitcoin space, the crypto space. So things like Celsius and BlockFi and all these things, they had big investments from Saudi investment firms in Dubai. Remember, all that oil money, it can't just go into US treasuries forever. It can't just go into single investments forever. There's so much wealth in the Middle East from the oil trade, and it usually goes into technology kind of at the end. But because there's no localized, kind of officially approved Bitcoin product that's been endorsed by the US government, that money has not flowed too well into Bitcoin. So usually only the venture arms of those foreign investment funds are just investing in, like, seed rounds or Series A, B, whatever in some of these companies. When these Bitcoin ETFs roll out, and I think they will in some amount of time, maybe a year, you're going to see massive allocations from sovereign wealth funds into this stuff. And then that trickles up higher up to the game theory, where eventually countries are going to have to accumulate this stuff. So my prediction is, while I don't see another country making Bitcoin legal tender in the next year, you're going to see massive sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, things that are almost de facto endorsements of Bitcoin from a state level start to get invested through things like ETFs. Yeah, that'll make some headlines. That'll create some FOMO, and things will look good for Bitcoin. One last note, one thing I wanted to end on, just a little bit of a thought here, is that we all hope the world moves and embraces Bitcoin. I do think that when the US dollar loses some sort of dominance or reserve status, I couldn't tell you when that is. I don't think the first instinct will be, let's all move to Bitcoin. I think there will be attempts from states to reintroduce another version of fiat, assured by some other basket of assets or something. There's going to be demand from people to have money that is backed by something kind of provably. I just don't think it'll necessarily be Bitcoin at the first go of it. But just keep in mind that if you want to see Bitcoin adoption around, you've got to go on a Bitcoin standard, and you've got to go out and you've got to spend it in your community. And I know it's daunting. And I know sometimes if someone asks you about Bitcoin and you're not like a big nerd like I am about it, it's kind of overwhelming to try and explain and answer everyone's questions and, God, figure out where to start. But what's really important is, if you like Bitcoin and you want to see it succeed, it's important that you become a model for it in some form or another. And it can be very subtle. You don't have to, be an expert and write a book and be on a podcast tour. You can share Bitcoin with your immediate family. You can ask all the merchants and stores you go to if they accept Bitcoin. You can show street buskers how to set up a Lightning wallet. Little things like that. It may not seem like they matter, but they all do in the end. And I'll try on my Twitter and in my other streams to kind of show examples of this, because I'm always trying to orange pill people and share a little bit without, spending an hour explaining every little in-depth part of monetary history and technology to people. You just want to get people's feet in the door and interest them a little bit in it. So these little acts of sharing Bitcoin with people, whether it's saving it up maybe for your nieces, put a little bit of Bitcoin money into their college fund, getting it into local stores or local vendors. These are all things that we're all capable of doing. Attending meetups, making, friends and peers at meetups. Like, there's all these little things that we can do on a very small communal level. And that's really where Bitcoin starts and thrives, is from the grassroots. So keep at it, gang. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll try and do more shows like this, a little more chill, off the cuff. And yeah, keep orange pilling. Hope you enjoy the coming week, and I will see all of you again on Friday. And if you're in Calgary, I will be there on, I think the rodeo is on the 4th and the 5th of July. So I will be there Tuesday, Wednesday. Come say hi if you're there in Calgary. And yeah, take care, everyone. Have a good one.